Imagine being able to read a book and actually remember everything you read a month later. Not just the general idea, but the details, the insights, the life-changing concepts that could transform your career or relationships. Now imagine doing this while reading faster, comprehending deeper, and actually enjoying the process more than ever before. Here's the thing most people don't know. The way you're reading right now is probably sabotaging your brain's ability to absorb information. You're working harder and retaining less. But I'm about to show you 5 reading habits used by the world's most successful people that will completely rewire how your brain processes information. And the best part? You can start using them today. Let me tell you about Michael. He was reading about 30 books a year. Sounds impressive, right? But if you asked him what he learned from any of those books 2 weeks after finishing them, he'd struggle to remember more than a vague summary. He felt like he was pouring water into a bucket with holes in the bottom. Then he discovered these 5 reading habits and everything changed. 6 months later, he wasn't just remembering what he read, he was applying the knowledge, making better decisions at work, having deeper conversations, and feeling like his brain had been upgraded. He read fewer books but retained exponentially more. Here's what most people get wrong about reading. They think it's a passive activity. You open a book, your eyes scan the words, and information magically downloads into your brain. Wrong. Reading is one of the most active cognitive processes you can engage in, but only if you do it correctly. Your brain is capable of incredible things, but it needs the right conditions to unlock its full potential. Neuroscientists have discovered that when you read with intention and use specific techniques, you activate multiple regions of your brain simultaneously. You're not just processing words. You're building neural pathways, strengthening memory networks, and literally changing the physical structure of your brain. Dr. Marianne Wolf, a cognitive neuroscientist, calls this deep reading, and her research shows it's becoming a lost art in our age of digital distraction. The 5 habits I'm about to share aren't just tips or tricks. They're scientifically proven methods that leverage how your brain actually works. They're based on decades of research in cognitive psychology, neuroscience, and learning theory. And they've been tested by everyone from students trying to ace their exams to CEOs trying to stay ahead in their industries. Think about how much time you invest in reading. If you're like most ambitious people, you probably spend several hours every week reading books, articles, or professional materials. Now, imagine if you could double or triple your retention rate from that same investment of time. That's not just an improvement. That's a complete transformation of your learning capacity and ultimately your life trajectory. If you want to discover more science-backed strategies to upgrade your brain and accelerate your personal growth, hit that subscribe button right now. Every week, I break down the latest research on learning, productivity, and self-improvement into practical strategies you can use immediately. Don't let this knowledge pass you by. Now let's dive into the 5 reading habits that will supercharge your brain. Reading habit number 1. Active annotation and dialogue with the text. Stop being a passive consumer of words and start having a conversation with what you're reading. Active annotation means you're constantly engaging with the material. You're underlining key passages, writing questions in the margins, making connections to other ideas, and challenging the author's assumptions. You're treating the book like a dialogue partner, not a lecture you're sitting through. When you annotate actively, you're forcing your brain to process information at a deeper level. Cognitive psychologists call this elaborative encoding. Instead of just recognizing words, you're analyzing, questioning, and integrating new information with what you already know. This creates stronger memory traces and makes recall significantly easier later. Take Lisa, a marketing executive who felt like she was drowning in business books, but never applying what she learned. She started a simple annotation system, underlining key concepts in one color, writing personal applications in the margins, and marking contradictions or questions with a special symbol. 3 months later, her presentations at work were filled with insights and frameworks from her reading. Her boss noticed the change immediately. She wasn't reading more books. She was extracting more value from each one. Here's the practical system you can use today. As you read, keep a pencil or highlighter handy. When you encounter an important idea, don't just highlight it. Write a brief note about why it matters or how you could use it. When something confuses you, write a question mark and your specific confusion. When you see a connection to something else you've learned, note it. Your book should look like a battleground of ideas, not a pristine, untouched object. Reading habit number 2, strategic breaks and spaced repetition. Your brain isn't designed to absorb information in one continuous stream. It needs time to consolidate what it's learning. This is where most people sabotage themselves. They'll read for 2 hours straight, close the book feeling accomplished, and wonder why they can't remember anything the next day. The science is clear. Your brain consolidates memories during breaks and sleep. When you take strategic breaks while reading, you're giving your brain time to move information from short-term to long-term memory. Research from the University of Sussex shows that taking a 10-minute break after every 40 minutes of reading can increase retention by up to 40%. But here's the game changer: spaced repetition. This is the most powerful learning technique ever discovered by cognitive science, and almost nobody applies it to reading. Here's how it works. After you finish a chapter, close the book and spend 5 minutes writing down everything you remember without looking. Not perfectly formatted notes, just a brain dump of key ideas. Do this again the next day, then 3 days later, then a week later. James was a college student convinced he had a bad memory. He'd read his textbooks multiple times and still struggle on exams. Then he started using spaced repetition with his reading. After finishing each chapter, he'd write a summary from memory. The next morning, he'd review his summary and add anything he missed. Before exams, he'd review all his summaries. His grades went from C's to A's. The material wasn't harder. His approach was smarter. Reading habit number 3, the Feynman technique for comprehension. This habit is named after Nobel Prize-winning physicist Richard Feynman, who was famous for his ability to explain complex concepts in simple terms. The technique is brilliantly simple. After reading something, try to explain it to someone who knows nothing about the topic, using the simplest language possible. If you can't do this, you don't really understand it. Here's why this is so powerful. When you try to teach something, your brain has to organize information differently than when you're just passively consuming it. You have to identify the core concepts, understand the relationships between ideas, and find clear ways to communicate them. This process reveals gaps in your understanding that you didn't even know existed. Think of it like this. Reading a recipe isn't the same as being able to cook the dish. You might recognize all the ingredients and steps, but until you actually try to make it and encounter the real challenges, you don't truly understand the recipe. The Feynman technique is your way of cooking with the information you've read. Sarah, a data scientist, was reading advanced statistics books, but felt like the knowledge wasn't sticking. She started a practice. After every chapter, she'd pretend to explain the concept to her 10-year-old niece. She'd use analogies, simple examples, and everyday language. If she struggled to explain something simply, she knew she needed to go back and reread that section. Within weeks, her understanding deepened dramatically. She wasn't just memorizing formulas. She was truly comprehending the underlying principles. You can implement this immediately. After finishing a chapter, close the book and ask yourself, how would I explain this to a smart friend who knows nothing about this subject? Say it out loud or write it down. Use analogies. Avoid jargon. If you get stuck, that's valuable feedback. Go back and reread the parts you couldn't explain. Reading habit number 4. Reading with a specific question or purpose. Never start reading without knowing why you're reading. This might sound obvious, but most people pick up a book and just start from page 1 with no clear objective. This is like going to a grocery store without a list and wandering the aisles hoping to remember what you need. Possible, but incredibly inefficient. Before you start any reading session, spend 2 minutes asking yourself, what do I want to get from this? Am I reading to solve a specific problem? To gain a new perspective? To find actionable strategies? To understand a concept that confuses me? Your brain's reticular activating system, the part that filters information, will automatically highlight relevant information once you've set a clear intention. A Stanford study on reading comprehension found that students who read with specific questions in mind retained 65% more information than those who read without a clear purpose. Why? Because purposeful reading activates your brain's pattern recognition system. You're not processing every word equally. You're hunting for specific insights, which creates a more engaged and efficient reading experience. Marcus, an entrepreneur, used to read business books cover to cover, feeling obligated to absorb everything. Then he shifted his approach. Before opening any book, he'd write down 3 specific questions he wanted answered. As he read, he'd focus intensely on finding answers to those questions, skimming or skipping sections that weren't relevant. He read fewer pages but applied more ideas. His business growth accelerated because he was reading for application, not completion. Reading habit number 5, the immediate application rule. Here's the habit that separates people who read a lot from people whose lives are transformed by what they read. Within 24 hours of learning something valuable, you must apply it in some concrete way. Not eventually. Not when you finish the whole book. Immediately. Your brain learns through action, not just through consumption. When you apply an idea right away, you're creating an experience around that knowledge. You're encoding it not just as abstract information, but as lived wisdom. This creates exponentially stronger memory formation and deeper understanding. Think about learning to ride a bike. You could read 10 books about bike riding, understand all the physics and techniques, but until you actually get on a bike and try it, you haven't really learned. The same principle applies to everything you read. The application creates the learning. Amanda, a teacher, started a simple rule. Every time she read something useful, she'd implement one idea in her classroom within the next day. She read about growth mindset. The next morning, she changed how she gave feedback to students. She read about engagement techniques. That afternoon, she tried one in her lesson. Within a semester, her teaching had been completely transformed. Her colleagues asked what professional development program she'd attended. She told them, "I just started doing what I was reading about." Let me recap these 5 brain-supercharging reading habits. First, actively annotate and dialogue with the text instead of passively consuming words. Second, take strategic breaks and use spaced repetition to cement information in your long-term memory. Third, use the Feynman technique to truly understand what you're reading by explaining it simply. Fourth, always read with a specific question or purpose to activate your brain's pattern recognition. Fifth, apply what you learn within 24 hours to transform information into embodied wisdom. Here's what your reading life looks like before these habits. You read books and articles but struggle to remember details a week later. You feel like you're consuming a lot but growing slowly. You wonder if you have a bad memory or if reading just isn't for you. You're frustrated by the gap between the time you invest and the results you see. Here's what your reading life looks like after implementing these habits. You retain more from one book than you used to get from 10. Conversations with friends and colleagues are richer because you can recall and apply what you've learned. You make better decisions because you have a mental library of wisdom you can actually access. You read less frantically and learn more deeply. Your brain feels sharper, you're thinking clearer, and your confidence in your own learning ability skyrockets. Your challenge is simple. Pick one of these 5 habits and implement it with your very next reading session. Don't wait. Don't try to do all 5 at once. Just choose one and commit to it for the next week. Drop a comment right now telling me which habit you're going to start with. This creates accountability, and I genuinely want to hear about your transformation. If this video helped you see reading in a new way, hit that like button so more people can discover these brain-supercharging habits. And subscribe because I'm breaking down the science of learning and high performance every single week. Your brain is far more powerful than you realize. These 5 habits will prove it to you. Now go unlock that potential.